Hello everybody, my name is Terry Fisher and I'm joined with my colleague Richard Walsh here to give you a presentation webinar on the benefits of integrating your management systems.
Good afternoon, wherever you are. Hi, as I say, I'm Richard. We're both NQA's Principal Assessors.
Just to go through a bit of housekeeping, if you've got any questions, by all means, type them in the chat box or questions box as we're going through. We will have plenty of opportunity to answer questions and have small discussion points as we go through the presentation. We expect the presentation to last for about 45 minutes this afternoon, so we should be finished for about 2:45 UK time. So, the benefits of integrating your management system. So, like I say, myself, Terry Fisher and Richard Walsh, don't wait for us to stop and ask questions or whatever, just pop them in as we go. Just to give you a bit of an outline of NQA and the global coverage for our clients and customers. You can see there, we're in the top 3 within the UK, number 1 in Americas for certification of aerospace sector, etc. And there's some marketing information there in terms of what we cover, the different sectors. So basically, wherever you are in the world and whatever your needs, I'm sure we can accommodate the majority of them, if not all. We're quite a long established organisation. We've got over 50,000 certificates globally. We've been going for over 30 years. And as you can see from that, we have all-inclusive fees for within the UK, and with over 50,000 certificates, I think we've got a good representation in the marketplace.
Good.
We will be issuing a PDF of all the slides and the full presentation. The presentation is recorded and will be available via the various channels at the end. So if you're unable to watch it live, you can always play it back and catch up. So the webinar, the agenda for the webinar is briefly, I'll give you an overview of the objectives, look at Annex SL and PAS 99, combination of standards, why integrate, what does integration do, how to think of integration, and common and different areas for discussion as we go through.
Do you want me to?
So I'll let Richard step in now in terms of Annex SL.
Yeah. Okay. Annex SL has been around, 2011. So we're talking 11 years now. And what it did, it provided a new structure for all of the different ISO management systems. There used to be a document called Guide 83, which had a bit of an attempt to try and make sure that all of the standards were produced in the same format. However, Annex SL, which was published in 2011, provides this new high-level structure. I sometimes describe it as a blank standard. So it's the canvas, it's the structure on which all of the newer standards, all of the standards since 2015, and a couple before that actually, but they were more minor standards. So things like 9001, 14001, 45001, 50001, they all follow exactly the same clause numbers, exactly the same structure, and part of that was to streamline them, to encourage a standardized approach, but above all, to make it a lot easier to pull together a fully integrated system using one or all of the standards that we've just talked about. So that's what Annex SL is. If you hear people talk about Annex SL, it's the layout, the structure of the standards that all these new standards actually follow. If you want to just move on to the next slide, Terry, for me, please. So this is one that I use when I'm doing any of my presentations on some of my standards. Those 10 clauses are the Annex SL format. We're only interested as an auditing organisation, and you as businesses who will be implementing these standards. The clauses that are auditable are clauses 4 to 10. Don't worry about clause 1 scope. That doesn't refer to the scope of your management system. Clause 1 scope refers to the scope of the standard itself, whether it's an environmental management system, a health and safety management system, or a quality management system. It sets out the scope of the standard, not the scope of your management system, which comes under clause 4 context. So what they've tried to do in all of those clauses is to have identical core text. Now, obviously, there are some differences because there are slightly different requirements from, say, health and safety as there are from quality. But where they can, they've used identical core text and tried to share common terms and common core definitions, just so that you're not having to do one thing for quality and something completely different for health and safety, say. So they've done everything they can to encourage the integration of all of the standards using that common format. Next slide. You might have heard of PAS 99. There's a whole number of PAS standards. PAS stands for publicly available specification. I always think it's funny because it's a publicly available specification, but you've got to buy it. So there is a version called PAS 99, which is almost a guide on how to do the integration. Now, if you look at the date, it was published in 2012, so it was updated in 2012 to give some guides to the new Annex SL, and it's a guidance document that gives you a little bit of thought and prompts on how to pull the different standards together, highlighting the common elements and how to integrate them. PAS 99 isn't an auditable standard. You can't get certification to PAS 99. It is purely giving you some additional information on how you might make sure that the integrated standards meets the requirements of all the different standards. Talks about how you can audit one system at a time to save money and resources. So you might look at things like process auditing, where you look at a process and look at maybe 3 standards within that same process. Helps about removing the need to duplicate tasks, etc., etc. So you might refer to PAS 99 if you want some guidance on doing the integration, but actually I'm not sure you would need it because I think the work they've done on Annex SL has made it dead easy to pull these standards together. Obviously, you can integrate any or all of them. Those are popular combinations, I think, between us, Terry, with clients that have got nearly all of them in place. Yep. Quality and environment, quality and health and safety, environment and health and safety. I have a client next week I'm working with that's just on environment and energy, and so on. So you can combine any of those, and there's others besides. So you've got there's the standards on food safety, the standards on information security. All of these standards now follow the Annex SL route and can be easily integrated. Next slide. And again, that's just making the point that I just made, that the number of management systems has increased greatly. We're all aware, I think, of the sort of the big 3, as I call them, quality, environment, and health and safety. But these are some of the others now. We've got energy management, information security, 27,001, food safety management systems, medical devices, risk management, and the list goes on and on. But anything that's got a date post 2011 will be in the format required by Annex SL, which means it can be easily integrated into an overall fully integrated management system. Go on, Terry, you do a little bit on why should we think about integrating?
Yeah, so here we're trying to identify, so why integrate and what many companies and organizations are looking for. We're looking at better utilization of resources. I think almost every business is looking for that. And that's the same can be said for all of these points. So we're all looking for less bureaucracy, All areas of the business can be aligned and delivering company-wide objectives, so working collectively together to deliver that one goal or the numerous goals and objectives of the organization. Looking to improve and make things more effective and efficient. The organization working as a team rather than in silos, because you can get a lot of conflict in terms of one part of the organization needs to and wants this and another part of it. So there can be conflict arising from working in silos within the organization. Removal of delays and blockages within the process and the flow of information, etc. Having clear responsibilities and authorities. I think that's key in all organizations to make them effective. And clarity in the process of the organization and the processes that are undertaken with the organization. I think it's quite often a case where people get very familiar with their own processes, with their own elements within their own sector of the organization. They don't necessarily appreciate how that can then go on and impact the rest of the organization. So integration can certainly assist with that and clarifying those things. Management and oversight is made simpler because you've got similar reporting methodologies and mechanisms throughout the organization. And it also helps you to identify and prioritize improvements across whatever discipline the organization is choosing to integrate. And like I say, it should be creating less infighting and less barriers between departments. So I think most of us would agree that overall, that's what most organizations would like to see, and that's the core deliverables.
I think that's what, if you were to say to any company manager, what would you like out of how your company runs? What would you like from your management systems? That would almost be a shopping list, I think, of what people would want. So if you go to the next slide. Likewise, so that was almost like a shopping list for managers. Staff probably want less frustration, certainly want less paperwork. Everybody wants to understand what part they can play in the business and how the part that they play fits into the bigger picture. Everybody, we all want to feel part of a team, or I hope we all want to feel part of a team, and to know what part of the team they're responsible for, how they can play their part, and certainly not to make the same mistakes over and over again. So we've identified what managers want, we've identified what staff want. So if the managers and the staff want all of these things, then why in many organizations are we not seeing the support and development of an implementation of an integrated management system? Because an integrated management system will do everything that we've just seen on that shopping list. Terry, do you want to just talk through this slide on what does integration actually do then?
Yeah, so when we're looking at the standards and using the standards, because it is about not just complying with the standards, but an organization using the standards to best deliver what they need as an organization. It enables organizations to clarify the mission and objectives and be clear on what's to be achieved. Define all the processes and interfaces of the organization to ensure that all the various jigsaw pieces lock together to deliver that. It integrates the activities and the objectives and the process into one system, so it makes it transparent. It provides clear accountabilities and responsibilities at all levels within the organization. It enables processes and people and resources to be aligned, so they all understand where something stops and where something starts, and pushing in the same direction. It enables consistency of product and/or service. It helps to control the spurious generation of documents and various things. So you don't want various or everybody within their organization doing their own individual, let's say, action lists or objectives and various things unnecessarily. It may be appropriate to have smaller sub-objectives and sub-documentation, but you don't want them all going off and doing the same thing and doing 5 variations of the same process. It forms a basis for training across all the various disciplines and functions of an organization, and it provides management with a tool to assist in their oversight role to ensure that actually they've got a good understanding of what's actually going on within the organisation and not a perception, because a lot of organisations can suffer from the perceived activity and operation of the organisation, but actually when you actually get into the operational elements, it can be somewhat different. So the perception and the reality can differ. And it also identifies what needs to improve and how to get better over time, where lessons have been learned, etc.
There's a couple of questions coming, Terry. If we can just pause for a second and maybe just think about the two questions that we've got.
Yep.
So Roger wants to know, is AS 9100 able to be integrated just as easily with 14,001 and 45,001? That's the first question. If I'm honest, neither Terry nor I are aerospace assessors. And my answer to that would probably be yes, but there may well need to be some bits that not sit outside the integration, but there may be certain sections of the integrated system that are pertinent only to 9100, because it sort of goes above and beyond the requirements of 9001.
Yeah.
I think the sort of the core elements of AS 9000 and AS 9100 are the same as 9001, which is why it's got a similar number, but there are some unique additions, and I don't see why it couldn't be. As I say, there might just need to be some bits that are still within the integrated system, but are purely relevant to how 9001 would require an area to be managed, probably in things like so the traceability. I know that's a very key area in AS 9100 that you wouldn't necessarily find in environment or health and safety, but traceability of parts and components, and also traceability of material back through material certs. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it could sit just as equally well within a 14 and 45,000 integrated system. I'll let you handle the other one, which is, I'll read it out. Can you see the other question, Terry?
No, I can't really.
I'll read it out. So, well, this is from Dwayne. We have 3 management systems, 9001, 20,000 and 27,001 in our large organisation. However, each have got different scopes, brackets none cover the same part of the organisation. Can these be integrated?
I think there are common elements that can be integrated. So shall we say things like there are common practices and common functions, things like corrective actions, communications, training, etc. So you would look at basically aligning those to have a common process across the organisation, while still delivering the individual requirements of each element of the organisation to meet the requirements of each scope of application for that particular standard, if that makes sense.
One of the things we haven't mentioned, when we, and I'm assuming that many of you are NQA clients, and even those of you that maybe not, when we start an audit, one of the things that we put down on the audit report is the level of integration. And there's 3 options. It could be full integration, partial integration, or no integration. And I think what Terry's talking about there is partial integration. So as you say, you take the common areas. So every single one of those standards requires internal audit, it requires management review, it requires a process for dealing with non-conformances, it requires a process for training, awareness and competency. So there are a number of areas that can be drawn together in a partial integration. But the fact that they've got different sites, different scopes, that might be a little bit of a barrier to a full integration.
Yeah. And it's very difficult from the outside in looking at how that would fit. It would be down to an internal review really to identify. And it's about efficiency basically. It's looking at the whole of the main thing is to look at this as a business management system and then see where the common frameworks can align without causing significant disruption, etc.
What I
Because
would,
it's
sorry, go
about
on, Terry.
delivering that.
Yeah. What I would suggest, because obviously neither Terry nor I know your system, it's the sort of question that you can ask at your next assessment. So whether you're an NQA client or with another certification body, when you have your next assessment, at some point during the day, ask the assessor's advice. What's their view on how you might be able to pull them together? Obviously, an assessor can't offer any sort of consultation, but they will certainly be able to give you an idea on their view on how easily they might fit together. It's very difficult, as Terry said, without knowing the actual location and the scope, etc., etc. But I think the middle of the three options as a partial integration for me would be where I'd probably be directing you to based on what we've seen in the question. Okay, shall we move on?
Yeah.
So, on what we've just seen and what we've just talked about in the slides that we've just seen, it seems to me that an integrated management system ought to be common sense. It's giving everybody what they want. However, just click the button again, Terry.
There we
As
go.
often in life, the problem with common sense is it ain't too common. And I still have a quite a sizable number of clients where they still run their management systems as a standalone system and haven't got round to integrating them, despite some nudging from me. And I guess you're maybe the same, Terry, that you've got clients that have not got fully integrated systems.
Yeah, I think one of the things there, and I think there is a perceptual fear that that by integrating them, you dilute the effectiveness of.
Correct.
And,
Yeah.
and that isn't the case, in fairness.
No.
The organisation's commitment to all the disciplines of integration and management systems, etc. It's only as good as the management commitment wants to deliver that. So there's no reason why integration should dilute the effectiveness of.
No.
If there needs to be more focus on a particular area because of a particular set of requirements within the organisation, at that given time, if you link that back to the context of the organisation, these things do change. And what may be a priority at one time of the year may not be the same priority at a later part of the year or whatever, or a different element of the organisation itself. So using that contextual phraseology and using that management system to deliver that, it's important that there is flexibility within the system to enable that delivery of what is required and when it's required by the organisation in whichever department and function.
Yeah. Next slide, please. So again, okay, we'll move on. So what should we think about if we sat here now with 2 or 3 completely separate certificated systems? What should we think about? And I guess the first bullet point is taking us back to the question that Dwayne asked about what's appropriate for my organisation in terms of the extent to which we integrate. Obviously, Terry and I have seen 9, 14 and 45 systems very, very successfully fully integrated. But when we talk about slightly different scopes, it was a question that cropped up this morning in my presentation, where I was doing a presentation on 14,001 Back to Basics about integration and sites with slightly different scopes. And that can start to cause a little bit of a problem with a fully integrated system. So the first thing to decide is, if we decide we wish to integrate, how far are we going to go? Are we going to go partially, or are we going to go all the way? Sort of picking up on what Terry was saying a little bit, the cultural aspects of the business and its management style. Some people can see an integration as a threat. So in other words, they've got their own little empire. I'm the health and safety manager, I've got my empire. Does that mean that other people are going to start poking the nose in what I'm doing? Or do we have, so have we a culture of silos? And if so, do we need to break down some of those barriers? is it going to be something that's embraced, or is it something that's going to be resisted? And again, only you know what the culture of your own organisation is, but it's something that needs to be borne in mind. Some people will see it as a threat in some degrees of integration. Have you got the right competency? Have you got the ability? Have you got the skills to be able to pull all of this together? Or do you need some external support? That's what consultancies are for. That's not what we're for. We can't help with that, but we can give you some, obviously, as we're doing now, some overall advice. But in terms of how might this procedure work, if it was split across all 3 standards, you would need some additional help if you weren't sure. Also key to that is how legislation and other requirements or
compliance obligations, yeah.
Yeah, so some standards still call it legislation, some standards call it compliance obligations. We're not bothered. And within an integrated system, you can call things what you like, to be honest. If you want to, I have clients with an integrated system that have retained the term legal and other requirements. I have also clients that have used the term compliance obligations. Now, 45,001 I don't think refers to compliance obligations. I think it still uses legislative or legal and other requirements, but yep. It wouldn't be a problem if you badged your register compliance obligations.
Nope.
It wouldn't matter at all. What's more important is what's in there, not the name that's at the across the top of a documentation. But I think more importantly than anything else, as with any journey that you're setting out on, is setting clear objectives. What do we want the system to look like when we get to the end of the process? You know, if you don't know your destination when you're setting out, you're very likely to get there. So making sure that you understand what the destination is, and one of those key destination choices is the first bullet point, which is the extent to which integration should occur. So all of these standards, and this is coming back to the Annex SL view now, every single one of these standards follows the, for those of you with an interest in quality, it's called the Deming cycle: plan, do, check, act. Plan, to establish what needs to be achieved; do, implement the process; check, monitor and measure the processes and their outputs; and act, respond. And that plan, do, check, act process could also be used as part of the integration process. As you're working your way through pulling these standards together into an all-embracing management system, an integrated management system, that plan, do, check, act process can still drive the integration process itself. You need to plan what you're going to do. You need to start to work on what you've planned, check whether it's giving you what you needed, is it working, and then act to maybe tweak it or improve the areas as you're going through. So don't just throw the plan, do, check, act, PDCA out the door. Try and use that also as part of the integration process.
Yeah, it's fair to say it is an underpinning theme of management standards. And I say deliberately say management standards, it applies to all of them.
Every single one, and that's right. Next slide. Right.
So this you're into Richard's favourite thing now.
This is my favourite little bit of how to think of an IMS. In a previous life, when I worked in training, this is how I used to get people to start to think about an integrated management system. So I'd like you to think of a bare Christmas tree. You know, it's a couple of weeks before Christmas, or as some people do now in mid-November, when they start getting the Christmas trees out of the loft or trying to buy the real ones. So the bare Christmas tree is your Annex SL. So that is the structure of the management system. That is Annex SL. So first click, Terry.
I don't know that.
So what we start to do now is to dress the Christmas tree. So we have some blue baubles that we hang on that are the quality related areas. So there are some things that quality requires. There are some things that environment requires that aren't in quality. There are some things in health and safety. And I think the final one, Terry, might be yellow for energy. And the idea being that as we work our way through the integration process, we start off with that bare Christmas tree, and we try and make sure that all of the different areas that we need to be within the system, and you may not have a full Christmas tree with all the 4 on, and it would work just as well for, say, quality and environment or environment and health and safety. You dress the Christmas tree with the requirements that are specific. So, for instance, environment requires aspects and impacts evaluation, quality doesn't. Health and safety requires some degree of employee consultation, the other standards don't. So these are the bits that are unique to the different elements of the integrated system. But by working through each of the standards, looking for the unique bits and also then looking for the bits that are common, you will have covered all bases and you will end up with a finally nicely dressed Christmas tree. And then I used to joke that we stick the star on the top. When I used to present this 20 years ago, we used to stick a fairy on top. It's probably slightly more PC to stick a star on the top now, and the star's the chief executive who sits at the top of the organization. So that's how I like to think, and as we see there, that's something very similar, but more in management speak, showing how there are common areas that will sit fully within the integrated system, and there are other bits that will still be within the system but might have some unique areas required. So that's a slightly more management system version of the previous Christmas tree slide. So, do you want to just start thinking, Terry, about what are these common elements, and maybe just see if anybody's got any questions or any discussion about some of the things? Because I think that there are 5 clauses that are common, and no matter which standard they are, they're going to have more or less the same needs, and there are somewhere we're going to get some differences. So these are the slides, these are the clauses rather that are common.
Yeah, so obviously if we're familiar with the Annex SL clauses, then obviously context and needs of interested parties. Now, that doesn't mean to say that all the interested parties for each discipline are different, but there will be different interested parties across various disciplines. And you've got to think of those discipline specific, but collectively in the management system, they can all contribute to the management system in the same way. So the process, not the content, but the process can be a common element that is used throughout all the disciplines. And the same would be said for the leadership clauses and, the policy roles, responsibilities, the leadership commitment, etc. Although there may be individual variances in those requirements in the various disciplines, the principle and process of the clause remains consistent throughout. Yep. And again, in clause 6, risks and opportunities, compliance obligations, objectives and planning. Now, for example, in 9001 quality management, risks and opportunities may include commercial risks and opportunities, which could include, I don't know, process renewal or process change. It could involve introducing new technologies, etc., etc. It could be changes in the marketplace. All these things have to be considered and linked back into the context and needs of the interested parties, and then obviously cascade down through the leadership how we're going to address these risks and opportunities, how we're going to ensure we meet our compliance obligations, how do we ensure we know what our compliance obligations are, how do we then identify objectives and planning to ensure that we deliver those needs and requirements as the system develops and the organisation moves forward. And in clause 7, the support, the resources, the competence, the communication and awareness, and the documented information is another common element that, regardless of whatever discipline, is required to its own nuances throughout the system. So each element will be covered in its own way depending on the discipline that it's been applied to, but the process itself remains a consistent factor. And last but not least, we've also then got clause 10, which is the improvement, the non-conformance, the corrective action, and continual improvement elements of the standard. So they are very common, although you may do them slightly differently. the principles of what you're trying to do remain consistent throughout any discipline within the management system structure.
Okay, I'll take the next one if you want, which I think is
Go
going
for
to
it.
be
So the next one is
areas of greatest difference. So the areas where we're likely to see the greatest difference is obviously operational planning and control, because here you're actually planning to carry out something that's relevant to the standard itself. So in environment, for instance, you might be planning how you will manage the output from an effluent treatment plant. You might be managing how you what goes up the chimney, what goes down the drain, what goes in the skips. In 9001, you are likely to be managing how you control an individual process, be it a sales process, be it a manufacturing process, be it a piece of machinery. And likewise with emergency preparedness, the types of emergency you come across are going to be completely different. Emergency preparedness doesn't appear in 9001, nor does it appear in 50001. But an emergency in health and safety will be totally different to, say, an environmental emergency where there's maybe a spill. Obviously, in health and safety, you might have somebody who's had a serious accident or incident on site, and how those are managed and dealt with and reported might be slightly different. Likewise, in clause 9, which is all about monitoring, measurement, analysis, evaluation, and so on, again, the type of monitoring that takes place is going to be different. So in health and safety, you might be monitoring near misses, you might be monitoring the type of accidents, the type of incidents you've had. In environment, you might be monitoring things like the flow of effluent, you might be monitoring the quality, you might be monitoring what goes up the chimney in terms of stack emissions. In quality, you might be monitoring customer satisfaction, you might be monitoring customer rejects, you might be monitoring scrap figures within the business. However, they are all still monitoring. You're monitoring something, it's just the type of monitoring and the output from that monitoring is completely different. However, coming back to this, are we talking about greatest difference? Internal audit and management review are again common to all of the standards. And one of the things I've found most beneficial with the clients that I've got who are fully integrated systems is it helps with process auditing. The standards require all of us, not just us as NQA, but you as clients as well, to look at doing process auditing rather than auditing by clause of the standard. So process auditing works best in an integrated management system. So let's say, as an example, I'm managing an electroplating plant and we're looking at the actual electroplating process. We can do a process audit. We can look at the quality aspect of how it's being managed. Are the right parameters being set? What's the quality of work coming off? We can look at the environmental aspects. So how's it being managed if there's a spillage? How's it being managed in terms of emissions and things like that? And we can look at the health and safety side. So is one audit on that process can look at the quality of what's being done. Is it being done in an environmentally sound manner? And is it being done in a safe way for the staff operating that process? All in one audit of that particular process. So even the areas that have got the greatest difference, I think, can still be pulled together into some degree of a process auditing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's about understanding your business and making the management system deliver benefit for you, and not just meeting the requirements of a clause of a standard or whatever. It's about really looking at the business and going, so what do we need to get out of this, and ensure that that delivers that benefit going forward.
Okay, next slide, please. That's it, really. Just one thing, and I don't quite know how best to facilitate this. Dwayne earlier on asked about managing, integrating 9, 20,000 and 27,001. How can it be integrated? A gentleman who was on the call with me this morning and has joined again, so he's obviously not sick and tired of listening to me, has offered. He said, I operate a management system that integrates 9001 and 27001. I will be happy to be contacted by your last questioner. And Anthony's put his email address and a mobile phone number. I don't know how we might facilitate that and pass that information on to Dwayne.
Can I suggest then that Dwayne then emails you, Richard, as soon as you've got the contact details, and
Yeah.
you just purely act as an intermediary?
Are you still on the call, Dwayne? Maybe just put a yes or no within the question box. If you send me an email, Dwayne, it's richard.walsh, that's W-A-L-S-H, richard.walsh@nqa.com. I'll then pass you Tony's contact details. I'm hoping you're still there. You haven't responded at the moment, but if you are still with us, Dwayne, I've got Anthony's email address and mobile phone number if you want to give me a call, and I'll pass it on that way rather than sharing it with everybody. With about 5 minutes left, if anybody has any other questions, right. Oh, it's put will do. Thank you. No worries, Dwayne. Somebody who maybe joined us a little bit later, could we pass the slide copies? Right. I think we mentioned this right at the start. Everybody who signed up to this webinar, whether they've turned up or not, will receive an email next week now, because it's Friday afternoon, but we'll receive an email next week, A, thanking them for signing up and attending, and B, there will be attached to that, there will be a PDF of all of the slides, and there will be a YouTube link to a recording of this webinar so that you can go and listen to it again if you so wish. If you think, well, what did they say about that? That was interesting. I can't remember what they said. You can go back and listen to it again. So, Eddie, you will get a copy of the slides and a link to a recording of this webinar next week. Anything else at the moment? We've got a couple of minutes left. I can't see any more questions just at the moment. Anything you want to add, Terry?
No, I mean, the main thing is think about integration. I will just add very quickly that there is a commercial driver as well for integration, in terms of, A, potentially it can reduce the amount of external audit time that's needed, because the economy of scale can kick in terms of looking at context, etc., etc. So there can be a reduction in the amount of external assessment time. And in my view, more importantly, there is a real benefit to an organization of integration, because it reduces duplication within the organization. So your internal impact of running management systems and administering them can be vastly improved by looking at integration and looking at how efficient and effective it can be within your own organization, rather than trying to duplicate things in silos. So there are some real good benefits there.
And it will also cut down on your auditing time.
Yeah.
So
up to 20% is the maximum
20%.
reduction.
So if you've got, say, and I don't know, 3 management systems in place, and the total sum of NQA time for those 3 management systems is 8 days a year, then we could save you up to 2 days, because obviously there are common elements and we're not having to audit different elements of the system several times. So there can be up to a 20% saving in terms of the time allocated by us. So, you know, at the end of the day, that could save you a couple of grand if you are saving yourself 2 or 3 days of NQA auditing time as well.
And
right.
also consider the disruption potential to the organisation, because we're all aware external audits have a disruption value to some degree on an organisation. So the internal impact of that and the internal resource elements, that's where there's some real significant savings financially for an organisation.
Right, we both need to go. I'm about to start a stage 1 audit for a company in America, and Terry's got a meeting at 3 o'clock as well. So so we need to draw a line under that now. I've mentioned my email address. Obviously, there are email addresses for NQA. sales@nqa.com if there's anything that particularly interests you, or you can, I don't mind you emailing me, richard.walsh@nqa.com, and Terry, we're all first name dot second name, so Terry will be terry.fisher@nqa.com. So keep in touch if you like, and if you suddenly think of a question, think, oh God, I wish they'd asked that, feel free to send one or both of us an email, and we'll try and get back to you in the next few days. So thanks a lot. There's a couple of people saying thank you already, so great. It has been a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I would certainly recommend you having a think about looking to see what bits that you can fully integrate. We'll leave it at that. Thanks for your time. Thanks everybody. Well done. And as I say, if I've got an email, Dwayne, from you, I'll forward you that other presentation, Tony's details in a direct message. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for your help, Terry. Thanks a lot. And
thank you, everybody.
Have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, enjoy your weekends for those of you that have got some time away from work. Stay safe and keep well. Thank you all very much. Bye now.
Bye-bye.